Chapter 1, Part 2 of Christian Non-Resistance. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 1, Part 2 of Christian Non-Resistance in all its important bearings, illustrated and defended, by Aidan Ballou. The key text of non-resistance. Now let us examine Matthew verse 39. I say unto you, resist not evil, etc. This single text, from which, as has been stated, the term non-resistance took its rise, if justly construed, furnishes a complete key to the true bearings, limitations, and applications of the doctrine under discussion. This is precisely one of those precepts which may be easily made to mean much more or much less than its author intended. It is in the intensive, condensed form of expression, and can be understood only by a due regard to its context. What did the divine teacher mean by the word evil? And what by the word resist? There are several kinds of evil. 1. Pain, loss, damage, suffered from causes involving no moral agency, or natural evil. 2. Sin in general, or moral evil. 3. Temptations to sin, or spiritual evil. And 4. Personal wrong, insult, outrage, injury, or personal evil. Which of these kinds of evil does the context show to have been in our Saviour's mind when he said, resist not evil? Was he speaking of fires, floods, famine, disease, serpents, wild beasts, or any other mere natural evil agents? No. Then of course he does not prohibit our resisting such evil. Was he speaking of sin in general? No. Then of course he does not prohibit our resisting such evil by suitable means. Was he speaking of temptations addressed to our propensities and passions, enticing us to commit sin? No. Then of course he does not prohibit our resisting the devil, withstanding the evil suggestions of our own carnal mind, and suppressing our evil lusts. Was he speaking of personal evil, injury personally inflicted by man on man? Yes. Ye have heard it that hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, i.e., personal outrage, insult, affront, injury. The word evil necessarily means, in this connection, personal injury, or evil inflicted by human beings on human beings. But what did Jesus mean by the words resist not? There are various kinds of resistance, which may be offered to personal injury when threatened or actually inflicted. There is passive resistance, a dead silence, a sullen inertia, a complete muscular helplessness, an utter refusal to speak or move. Does the context show that Jesus contemplated, pro or con, any such resistance in his prohibition? No. There is an active righteous moral resistance, a meek firm remonstrance, rebuke, reproof, protestation. Does the connection show that Jesus prohibits this kind of resistance? No. There is an active, firm, compound, moral and physical resistance, uninjurious to the evil doer, and only calculated to restrain him from deadly violence or extreme outrage. Was Jesus contemplating such modes of resisting personal injury? Does the context show that he intended to prohibit all resistance of evil by such means? No. There is a determined resistance of personal injury by means of injury inflicted, as when a man deliberately takes life to save life, destroys an assailant's eye to save an eye, inflicts a violent blow to prevent a blow, or as when in retaliation he takes life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, etc. Or as when by means of governmental agencies he causes an injurious person to be punished by the infliction of some injury equivalent to the one he has inflicted or attempted. It was of such resistance as this that our Saviour was speaking. It is such resistance as this that he prohibits. His obvious doctrine is, resist not personal injury with personal injury. I shall have occasion to press this point more conclusively in the next chapter, when presenting my scriptural proofs. Enough has been said to determine the important bearings and limitations of the general doctrine. It bears on all mankind, in every social relation of life. It contemplates men as actually injured, or in imminent danger, or being injured by their fellow men, and commands them to abstain from all personal injuries, either as a means of retaliation, self-defense, or suppression of injury. If smitten on the one cheek, they must submit the other to outrage, rather than smite back. if the life of their dearest friend has been taken, or an eye or a tooth thrust out, or any other wrong been done to themselves or their fellow men, they must not render evil for evil, or railing for railing, or hatred for hatred. But they are not prohibited from resisting, opposing, preventing, or counteracting the injuries inflicted, attempted, or threatened by man on man, in the use of any absolutely uninjurious forces, whether moral or physical. On the contrary, it is their bounden duty, by all such benevolent resistances, to promote the safety and welfare, the holiness and happiness of all human beings, as opportunity may offer. Necessary applications of non-resistance. The necessary applications of the doctrine are to all cases in human intercourse where man receives aggressive injury from man, or is presumed to be in imminent danger of receiving it, i.e. to all cases wherein the injury of man upon man is either to be repelled, punished, or prevented. There are 4 general positions in which human beings may stand to resist injury with injury. 1. As individuals. 2. As a lawless combination of individuals. 3. As members of allowable voluntary associations. And 4. As constituent supporters of human government in its state or national sovereignty. Standing in either of these positions, they can resist injury with injury, either in immediate self-defense, in retaliation, or by vindictive punishments. As individuals, they may act immediately by their own personal energies, or they may act through their agents, persons employed to execute their will. Connected with a lawless combination, they may act directly in open cooperative violence, or clandestinely, or through select agents, or in a more general manner through their acknowledged leaders. As members of allowable voluntary associations, they may exert a powerful influence, without any deeds of violence, by means of speech, the press, education, religion, etc., to delude, corrupt, prejudice, and instigate to evil the minds of mankind one toward another. Thus designedly to stimulate, predispose, and lead men to commit personal injury, under pretense of serving God and humanity, is essentially the same thing as resisting injury with injury by physical means. The mischief may be much greater, the moral responsibility certainly no less. As constituent supporters of human government, whether civil or military or a compound of both, in its state or national sovereignty, men are morally responsible for all constitutions, institutions, laws, processes, and usages which they have pledged themselves to support, or which they avowedly approve, or which they depend upon as instrumentalities for securing and promoting their personal welfare, or in which they acquiesce without positive remonstrance and disfellowship. Thus, if a political compact, a civil or military league, covenant, or constitution requires, authorizes, provides for, or tolerates war, bloodshed, capital punishment, slavery, or any kind of absolute injury, offensive or defensive, the man who swears, affirms, or otherwise pledges himself to support such a compact, league, covenant, or constitution is just as responsible for every act of injury done in strict conformity thereto, as if he himself personally committed it. He is not responsible for abuses and violations of the Constitution. But for all that is constitutionally done he is responsible. The army is his army, the navy his navy, the militia his militia, the gallows his gallows, the pillory his pillory, the whipping post his whipping post, the branding iron his branding iron, the prison his prison, the dungeon his dungeon, and the slave-holding his slave-holding. When the constitutional majority declare war, it is his war. All the slaughter, rapine, ravages, robbery, destruction, and mischief committed under that declaration, in accordance with the laws of war, are his. Nor can he exculpate himself by pleading that he was one of a strenuous anti-war minority in the government. He was in the government. He had sworn, affirmed, or otherwise pledged himself that the majority should have discretionary power to declare war. He tied up his hands with that anti-Christian obligation to stand by the majority in all the crimes and abominations inseparable from war. It is therefore his war, its murders are his murders, its horrible injuries on humanity are his injuries. They are all committed with his solemn sanction. There is no escape from this terrible moral responsibility, but by a conscientious withdrawal from such government, and an uncompromising protest against so much of its fundamental creed and constitutional law, as is decidedly anti-Christian. He must cease to be its pledged supporter and approving dependent. What a Christian non-resistant cannot consistently do. It will appear from the foregoing exposition, that a true Christian non-resistant cannot, with deliberate intent, knowledge, or conscious voluntariness, compromise his principles by either of the following acts. 1. He cannot kill, maim, or otherwise absolutely injure any human being in personal self-defense, or for the sake of his family, or anything he holds dear. 2. He cannot participate in any lawless conspiracy, mob, riotous assembly, or disorderly combination of individuals, to cause or countenance the commission of any such absolute personal injury. 3. He cannot be a member of any voluntary association, however orderly, respectable, or allowable by law and general consent, which declaratively holds as fundamental truth, or claims as an essential right, or distinctly inculcates as sound doctrine, or approves as commendable in practice, war, capital punishment, or any other absolute personal injury. 4. He cannot be an officer or private, chaplain or retainer, in the army, navy, or militia of any nation, state, or chieftain. 5. He cannot be an officer, elector, agent, legal prosecutor, passive constituent, or approver of any government, as a sworn or otherwise pledged supporter thereof, whose civil constitution and fundamental laws require, authorize, or tolerate war, slavery, capital punishment, or the infliction of any absolute personal injury. 6. He cannot be a member of any chartered corporation, or body politic, whose articles of compact oblige or authorize its official functionaries to resort for compulsory aid, in the conducting of its affairs, to a government of constitutional violence. 7. Finally, he cannot do any act, either in person or by proxy, nor abet or encourage any act in others, nor demand, petition for, request, advise, or approve the doing of any act, by an individual, association, or government, which act would inflict, threaten to inflict, or necessarily cause to be inflicted, any personal injury, as herein before defined. Such are the necessary bearings, limitations, and applications of the doctrine of Christian nonviolence. Let the reader be careful not to misunderstand the positions laid down. The platform of principle and action has been carefully founded, and its essential peculiarities plainly delineated. Let it not be said that the doctrine goes against all religion, government, social organization, constitutions, laws, order, rules, and regulations. It goes against none of these things per se. It goes for them in the highest and best sense. It goes only against such religion, government, social organization, constitutions, laws, order, rules, regulations, and restraints as are unequivocally contrary to the law of Christ, as sanction taking life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, as are based on the assumption that it is right to resist injury with injury, evil with evil. The principle and sub-principle of non-resistance. This chapter may be profitably concluded with a brief consideration of the doctrine under discussion, with respect to the principle from which it proceeds, to the sub-principle, which is its immediate moral basis, and to the rule of duty in which all its applications are comprehended. What is the principle from which it proceeds? It is a principle from the inmost bosom of God. It proceeds from all perfect love, that absolute, independent, unerringly wise, holy love, which distinguishes the divine from all inferior natures, and which, transfused into the natural sentiment of human benevolence, superinduces the highest order of goodness. Of this it is said, Love worketh no ill to his neighbour, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Or, as the amiable John expressed it, He that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. This love is not mere natural affection, nor sentimental passion, but a pure, enlightened, conscientious principle. It is a divine spring of action, which intuitively and spontaneously dictates the doing of good to others, whether they do good or evil. It operates independently of external influences, and being in its nature absolutely unselfish, it is not affected by the merit or demerit of its objects. It does not inquire, Am I loved? Have I been benefited? Have my merits been appreciated? Shall I be blessed in return? Or am I hated, injured, cursed, and condemned? Whether others love or hate, bless or curse, benefit or injure, it says, I will do right, I will love still, I will bless, I will never injure even the most injurious. I will overcome evil with good. Therefore, its goodness is not measured by or adjusted to the goodness of others, for ever finds in itself a sufficient reason for doing good and nothing but good to all moral agents. Jesus, in whom flowed the full current of this divine love, the sublime efflux of the heavenly nature, laying hold of the great commandment, Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself, drew it forth from the ark of the Mosaic Testament, all mildewed and dusky with human misapprehension, and struck from it the celestial fire. The true principle was in it, but men could not clearly perceive it, much less appreciate its excellency. He showed that the neighbour intended was any human being, a stranger, an enemy, a bitter foe, any one needing relief, or in danger of suffering through our selfishness, anger, or contempt, the greatest criminal, the veriest wretch of our race. Hence, knowing that the entire wisdom of this world had justified injury to injurers, hatred to enemies, and destruction to destroyers, he reversed the ancient maxims, abrogated the law of retaliation, and proclaimed the duty of unlimited forbearance, mercy, and kindness. Imperfect religion, worldly-minded philosophy, and vindictive selfishness had currently declared, there is a point beyond which forbearance ceases to be a virtue. He swept away this heartless delusion with a divine breath, and sublimely taught obedience and everlasting adherence to the law of love, as well as toward offenders, injurers, and enemies, as toward benefactors, lovers, and friends. I say unto you, take not life for life, eye for eye, and tooth for tooth. Smite not the smiter to save thine own cheek. Give to him that asketh, and turn not the borrower away. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to those that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love, and salute, and do good to them that love you, what are ye better than the publicans? Be like your Father in heaven. Such is the true light radiated from the bosom of the infinite Father, and reflected on this benighted world from the face of Jesus Christ. What are the puerile sentimentalisms of effeminate poets, or the gossamer elaborations of the world's philosophers, or the incantations of solemn but vindictive religionists, compared with the divine excellency of truth, as it is distilled in the language of the Messiah? All perfect, independent, self-sustaining, unswervable love, divine love, is the principle from which Christian non-resistance proceeds. What is the sub-principle which constitutes its immediate moral basis? The essential efficacy of good, as the counteracting force with which to resist evil. The wisdom of this world has relied on the efficacy of injury, terror, evil to resist evil. It has trusted in this during all past time. It has educated the human race to believe that their welfare and security depended mainly on their power to inflict injury on offenders. Hence it has been their constant endeavour to possess a sufficiency of injurious means to overawe their enemies and terrify their encroaching fellow men. Their language has been, keep your distance, touch not my property, insult not my honour, infringe not my rights, assail not my person, be just and respectful, yield to my convenience, and be my friend, or I will let slip the dogs of war, you shall feel the weight of my vengeance, I will inflict unendurable injuries on you, death itself, torture, imprisonment in a loathsome dungeon, pains and penalties shall be your portion. I will do you incomparably greater evil than you can me. Therefore be afraid, and let me alone. And so perfectly befooled are the children of this world, with faith in injury as their chief ultimate security, that scarcely 1 in 1,000 will at first thought allow the non-resistance doctrine to be anything better than a proclamation of cowardice on one side, and universal anarchy, lawlessness, and violence on the other. As if all mankind were so entirely controlled by the dread of deadly, or at least tremendous personal injury, that if this were relinquished, a man's throat would be instantly cut, his family assassinated, or some other horrible mischief inflicted. Very few know how entirely they trust for defense and security in this grim and bloody god of human injury. They have enshrined him in the sword, the gibbet, and the dungeon. They worship him in armies, navies, militia, organizations, battleships, forts, arsenals, penal statutes, judicial inflictions, pistols, daggers, and bowie knives. And if we propose to lay all these evils aside, and go for nothing but uninjurious beneficent treatment of mankind, never transcending, even with the most outrageous, the limits of firm but friendly personal restraint, lo, they cry out with alarm, These have come hither that turned the world upside down. Torment us not before the time. Great is Diana of the Ephesians. Great is the sword, the halter, the salutary power to kill or injure sinners at discretion. What would become of society if war, capital, and other injurious punishments should be abolished? On this altar they have sacrificed human beings enough to people 20 such planets as the earth, with no other success than to confirm and systematize violence throughout the whole habitable globe. And yet injury is their god, and at his gory altar of revenge and cruelty they are resolved for ever to worship, amid the clangor of deadly weapons, and the groans of a bleeding world. The conclusion. But the Son of the Highest, the great self-sacrificing non-resistant, is our prophet, priest, and king. Though the maddened inhabitants of the earth have so long turned a deaf ear to his voice, he shall yet be heard. He declares that good is the only antagonist of evil, which can conquer the deadly foe. Therefore he enjoins on his disciples the duty of resisting evil only with good. This is the sub-principle of Christian non-resistance. Evil can be overcome only with good. Faith, then, is the inherent superiority of good over evil, truth over error, right over wrong, love over hatred is the immediate moral basis of our doctrine. Accordingly, we transfer all the faith we have been taught to cherish in injury to beneficence, kindness, and uninjurious treatment, as the only all-sufficient enginery of war against evildoers. No longer seeking or expecting to put down evil with evil, we lift up the cross for an ensign, and surmounting it with the glorious banner of love, exult in the divine motto displayed on its immaculate folds, resist not injury with injury. Let this in all future time be the specific rule of our conduct, the magnetic needle of our pathway across the troubled waters of human reform, till all men, all governments, and all social institutions shall have been molded into moral harmony with the grand comprehensive commandment of the living God, Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. Then shall love, God by his sublimest name, be in all. The earth so long a slaughter field, shall yet an Eden bloom. The tiger to the lamb shall yield, and war descend the tomb. For all shall feel the Saviour's love, reflected from the cross. That love, that non-resistant love, which triumphed on the cross. End of chapter 1, part 2.